Welcome to the Pixel Retentive Podcast, where we, a business owner and an artist, discuss the business of art and the art of business. Hey friends, I'm Carl, founder of Epic Made, and my co-host Ross is out today, but we're the hosts of the Pixel Retentive Podcast, where we share our thoughts on creativity, art, and business. Past guests include Gage Mitchell of Modern Species, Ben Moffat of Gantry, and Josh Hill of Left Field Labs. We're forever grateful for the supporters of our podcast, and we are always looking for more sponsors. That said, Pixel Retentive is brought to you by the creative gurus at Epic Made. Epic Made is a team of strategists and artists who excel in visual storytelling. Our studio crafts unforgettable animation and illustration that not only captivates your audience, but also drives tangible business results. We specialize in engaging with imaginative pop culture savvy brands with beloved clients like Nickelodeon, WWE, and Sci-Fi. Visit getepicmade.com and let's collaborate on your next creative campaign. All right, so with us today, we have Mark Jamnik. Hey, Mark, welcome to the show.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Yeah, man. All right, so Mark is the founder of Kindred Growth Advisors and specializes in working with creative agency owners to create a reproducible sales process called the Reconnect Framework. The Reconnect Framework blends the art of biz dev communication to the automation capabilities of a CRM to focus on a relationship-based approach to follow-up over the long-tail B2B process. He is also a speaker, author, and abstract artist and creates art with intention called Subliminal Story Art. He brings a unique blend of art and systems that leverage the technology of their CRM. Visit kindredgrowth.com to learn more about all the cool stuff that Mark does. All right, Mark. That was
awesome.
fun.
Thank you. That was fun. Yes. Yeah, man. I'm excited to be here. You and I have some great chats outside of podcasts, so I can't wait to hear what we have to talk about here on this podcast.
Absolutely. So our first little intro question, so the audience gets to know you a little better. Tell us how long you've been in your industry and the project you're most proud of so far.
Whew, man. So I have been in the advisory industry now for 13 years. I launched my company in 2011, and it was after I spent over almost a decade in the advertising sales world. So after kind of some tumultuous years from 2008, I think we all know what happened in 2008, similar to like how we all know what happened in 2020.
Yeah.
Kind of interesting. And so I really have been developing the process and what you just read over the last 13 years. So, in terms of a project that I'm most excited about, it's the Reconnect Framework. And the reason I'm so excited about it is I'm writing a book right now, which will be out in Q3. And as I'm developing this book, it's interesting how as you kind of reassess and start formulating all these things into a structure and a process for something that's tangible, you really start to see the things that developed. And so I was working on this one tool for a year from 2012 to 2013. Then there's another tool that's in the Reconnect Framework that I was working on for a year. And interestingly enough, inside of this project, all of these components, that's why I call it a framework, is very intentional about the word framework, is they all work independently with each other and without each other. Right. So this isn't something where you have to go step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You could go step 3, then go down to 2, then to 7. And it's kind of really fascinating. So it's taken me 13 years to develop it. And it's been, an interesting road to say along the way. And I'm just really excited about how it's come together.
Yeah, dude, and it's a cool framework. Excuse me. I know I've gone through at least a good portion of it, right?
Yeah. I mean, we basically, inside of that framework, there's the initial stage of basically capturing things and applying things so that you start to actually see what elements you need to work on. Then there's the more polished elements of refining and automating, which we haven't gone through at this point. At the same time, it's this is where all the clarity comes, right? Because once you have clarity, you have focus and you have discipline and you have a direction and all of those things. And so, that's essentially kind of a real simple 4-step framework, basically: capture, apply, refine, automate.
Amazing. All right. So that kind of gets into what we're going to be talking about today, the art of intentional business relationships. And I know, you and I were sort of brainstorming a little bit before the call, before we started recording. And really this whole idea, just from the top, I think is a great place to start from, is just like the idea of selling versus relationship development, and how selling is so intimidating just to many artists, right? Artists run the full gamut, to like extroverted, creative weirdos like me, to like fully reclusive, like want to be in a little dark hole and make their art, not have to talk to anybody. Obviously sales is a little easier for somebody like me who like is really engaging with people just by my predispositions as a person. But like some people have a lot of struggle with that side of it, the business side of art, which is a whole part of this entire podcast, right? A whole theme. Right. So yeah, get on your soapbox. Let's talk about it.
Well, no, I mean, I literally you and I met through Lunch Club.
Right.
It was really cool. And so I was actually, I do those weekly. I mean, there's obviously some times where I'll miss a week here or there or whatever. And I just met someone yesterday, and we were talking about kind of selling, and she was talking about how she was like this recovering salesperson. And, as we were talking, it was like, look, we're speaking the same language. There's some really cool things about Lunch Club in terms of like how they pair you up algorithmically with different people. And that's why, like, after you and I met there, it's like, we've connected and worked on we have some fun projects that we're working on essentially now. And it was just organic. That all being said, as her and I were talking, like, there was this kind of visceral experience that she had around sales. And even though she had been in sales for a long time, and I said, we're actually speaking a lot of the same language, because I'm like, for me, like, I'm not intentionally trying to sell a lot of things. It's like, it's a matter of like, how do I actually connect to someone and see who it is that I'm talking to, and how is it that what I'm hearing, like, and listening for inside of the conversation, and how can I provide them something that can actually share something of really value that they might not even realize that they need.
Sure.
Because there's this whole concept of wants and needs, and you think about like what you want versus what you really need. And I remember hearing years ago, sell them what they want, give them what they need. And at times, like if you're offering someone exactly what they need, they might not choose to buy it because it's not what they want. It's what they need though. Right. So like there's this idea though of like even being able to listen and actively listening and caring and understanding who that person is. Like one of the pieces that we like first very, very early on inside of the Reconnect is, who's your audience? Like, who's your persona?
Right.
And I talk about the persona power of 3. It's the fundamental. I don't care what you're about to go do and offer and sell. Who do you want to offer this to?
Right. And why?
And why?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And why should they care about it at all? Right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah. And it begins to like understand you like want to have a relationship with this person, because then when you hear them, it's like, oh, actually, I really feel like I could serve them, right? Like as you and I talked on the Lunch Club when we first met, it was like, oh, wow, there's this opportunity. Like I hear some of the things that you were looking to do, and you heard some of the things that I wanted to do. And it was like, hey, let's figure out a way to make this work. And we have, because it started out with a relationship, and I heard what you were looking for and you heard what I was looking for. And it was a really unique approach to our business relationship together.
Right. 100%. Yeah. So it's really like, I heard Chris Do say, and it really resonated with me. I don't know if you ever listened to any of his content, but he's like, you should be treating all business relationships from a professional service position, almost like a doctor, where you're asking questions to diagnose, right? So that you can repeat these things back to them. They agree with them, and then you prescribe what you think is the solution, so they have a better understanding of what they need versus like, just trying to say, oh, well, you need this, right? Because sometimes they like just like your work, and they think they need a logo, but like or they think they need a website, but you got to go, hey, we probably should take 2 steps back and work on this brand first, like and some of these visual assets. Because if I make a new, if we paint this car and the engine's trash, like we don't, like, so you just gotta have the right diagnostic questions, and a lot of people have. There's a lot of those tools out there, and I'm sure there's some I'm sure in your framework as well. Actually, I know, like we've gone through a bit of that. So
yeah. And so as it relates to an artist, right? Like thinking about like who is that person that you're talking to, and like I create abstract art called Subliminal Story Art,
which is really cool, by the way.
Thank you. And so there's a piece behind me. This is actually a little bit of a different take on it. This one's called Yes and. There was a company in town, and they had actually had a bunch of their members all like paint the canvas, and then like they kind of came up with their own canvas, like that they all painted, and they're like, hey, we're actually not using this anymore. We know that you're an artist. Would you like it? We just don't want to throw it away. So I'm like, absolutely. So this one's called Yes and. So I yes anded everything that they had created, and then I painted over it. So like parts of what their initial contribution was is still underneath it, and I paint over it. So like each and every single time I do a painting, right, there's a story behind what was the inspiration that started that painting.
Nice.
So that's Subliminal Story Art. And so as it relates to some of the people that you may be talking to, whether it be at a market, it's summertime now when we're recording this, and so there's a lot of like art fairs and things of that nature where people are out and walking by, and not everyone's into abstract art. I get it, right? Like I love abstract art, doesn't mean that everyone loves abstract art. So like understanding and seeing if someone's going to stop or not, it might not, and it has nothing to do with you. It has to do with what they're interested in, right? And so as you have an opportunity, and it's an interesting question that I've been asking recently, like, hey, what kind of art, or do you enjoy abstract art? And a lot of people are like, they know art, they know the type of art that they like when they see it.
Yeah.
Is kind of the comment that I've been hearing recently. Because I've been asking that in a way of like, hey, what kind of either sparked your interest, or what exactly, or how do we get involved in this conversation? Not that I asked that question, but it's essentially kind of where I'm going. And it's that within that, it gives me a chance to start to see where are they starting from, or like, what are they interested in? And as I share the more of the story of art with intention, they start to say, oh, wow, that's cool. There's a story behind it. And so there's actually a story card that comes with each and every single one of my prints or reprints or originals. And they all have an opportunity to learn more about it. So again, where I'm kind of bringing this all back to it is just kind of understanding and listening to who that person is that's in front of you, so that you can actually start to develop a relationship. They might not buy anything from you, but at the same time, you can have an exchange about art and like what they're interested in. They might like mountains. Okay, great. Perfect. So you do a lot of things that are mountain oriented. Awesome. Right? Like now you've learned something about that person, and people right now, more so than ever, simply want to feel heard.
Interesting. Yeah, that makes sense. There's a lot of noise in the world. So
yeah.
I mean, so the more questions you ask, especially if you have like, okay, I've sold 10 paintings, or I've sold 10 pieces of commercial art, or whatever it is you're selling, understanding, asking questions posthumously, if you will, about what drew them to you is really helpful in building a persona of like, okay, well, I do really well with this demographic. Let me lean into that a little more, right? The trouble becomes when you're doing art for art's sake, that really you just need to lean into what makes you feel good and then get it out there, right? Because if you try to start like tailoring, like it can become more of a profession and less passion, and I've seen that lead to burnout and all sorts of stuff, even in myself. So.
I 100% agree with you. I read The Creative Act by Rick Rubin last year, and it's really, really good book. And that's one of the things that he talks about, inside of his book. And like I say inside of my book, I actually have another book that I wrote called Look at What's Inside. product placement here.
Good.
And one of the things, I painted the cover clearly.
Clearly.
And it's one of those things where I'm like, hey, my book, the reason I wrote this book is to help people feed their starving inner artist. And I am inviting people to connect back to their creativity and whatever that may be. I'm like, look, I'm talking about painting as the vehicle. You may like to sing or dance or whatever. Do that. And like, if you like to sing, sing for you. Like, sing for the fact that you love doing it. Even if you might not, quote unquote, be good at it. If you enjoy doing it, just keep doing it.
Yeah.
And so that's a really big thing here. And I also say, like, look, if you end up liking painting or singing or whatever, you don't have to quit your day job to go do that full time. Like, do it on the side. And if you enjoy it and you find some things, like, that's why I've got my advisory and I've got my art business, because like, it gives me an opportunity. I'm not so reliant on, to your point, changing up the style of my art so that it could fit into what someone wants to buy.
Right.
Now, people have been connecting to it in a way that I'm like, great. Like, I've sold originals, I've sold reprints, I've sold, prints. And so it gives me an opportunity to be like me. And that, to your point, is like, I have now found my voice inside of my art. And I've been kind of trying some different things. Like, this is the first time I've ever done one where I painted over something that was already painted.
Right.
It was someone else's, right? Instead of, I typically have people write things down on a canvas and then I paint over those words. So this is kind of a new like approach for me. And I think we always have to kind of like experiment as we're doing things. At the same time, like, my brother, who was really instrumental in me choosing the profession that I did, ultimately marketing, that is now kind of morphed into advertising, which is kind of now morphed into art, and kind of this blend of art and like coaching and selling and all this other stuff. But he said, it's interesting because even though my art all looks very different, like, there's some really like super, super vibrant pieces. There's some more like earthy pieces, and there's some like more toned down pieces. He's like, I could tell that's all painted by you, and even though they're all different. And so like, what's cool about that is that, yes, I'm allowing what needs to come out. Yeah. And I'm not trying to make it fit into a market that I feel like it could sell. Now that they're buying, now that I have certain people that have been connecting, I'm like, oh, now I could kind of approach these people about this style of art because they're connected to the style of art that I'm creating. I didn't like wedge it into a market. I've discovered the market, just like I discover what painting needs to be painted. So that's a very long-winded answer to
that's okay.
the thought or question.
No, it's perfect though. I mean, it's being true to yourself and having that creative outlet. And I think that's even important when you are a production and professional artist, like, to make sure you have time to play and experiment, right? So that's huge. But so when we circle this back into, the subject for today in terms of like building those relationships, it's not really about selling. It's really about like hearing the other person and just having a great story, right? The story behind the art is everything. Like, the story behind the business, behind the brand, behind you, like, people resonate with stories. And this is a huge part of how we do things with Epic Made as well. It's just, if you get the story out there, people resonate with stories. It's the oldest form of communication and handing things down, right? So like, the story behind your art is huge. The story behind a brand is huge. The story behind you as a person and how all that comes together, and people relate to that and then want to engage with it. And you do that masterfully with your work, like having the actual story accompany the art, because you can look at the art like, that's cool, I like this texture or these colors or whatever, but like it might attract you to it, but then like you want to open that book, it's like the cover, it's like, oh well, this is what it's all about, and it's like, oh wow, that deeply resonates with me, now I love it, now I want it on my wall, right? Like, so that's the whole thing.
Thank you. Yeah, and that's it. And it comes back to relationships. Like, what happens for me when I go inside of the community, I live in Bend, Oregon, so blessed to live here. I love it here. Very much an outdoor person, so I ski in the winter and I mountain bike in the summer. And as I go to these different events around town, I just have an opportunity to talk with people and, hear and learn a little bit about either what they did that day or what they're doing over the weekend, or like, what race they're planning on running or whatever. And just, it's from the standpoint of wanting to understand about them, like get to know them more so than it's not about me. Okay, I can, let me learn about this person so that I can sell them something. It's like,
right.
Let me get to know this person, whomever, if they resonate, like, great. Like there was a guy, I was at this maker market it was about a year and a half ago. And I was telling him about this piece called Indigenous Wisdom. I went to the Ecuadorian Amazon rainforest and met 2 indigenous tribes. And then the piece is called Indigenous Wisdom. And as I started telling him the story, he's like, that's awesome. He's like, I want it. And so we got to talking. We talked for like an hour after he bought the piece. And we have regular coffees. Like I just saw him on Saturday. Beautiful. And because it was like, we just had a relationship that like, I was like, I just enjoyed talking with you. Yes, you happen to buy my art, and like I appreciate who you are as like and what we've talked about and the way that we understand the world, see the world, and also like see it differently and kind of bring different perspectives. So like that to me is where that's the gift of life, is relationship. We're meant to be in relationship. Like, yes, you can go do all of these things. And yes, I love painting this and I love, having it on my wall behind me. And then like what makes it worthwhile is being able to like share it with someone. Like, look, I just painted this painting, not for me trying to get someone's like validation, like, oh, I like that too. If they like it, awesome. Right. If they don't, that's also fine.
Right.
Right. But the reason I'm kind of bringing this back to even the relationship is that there's a relationship that like when we see something and we do something and we love it, we want to share it with others. That's what it's about. Like, that's what life is about, is like, yeah, you go out and do all these things. And if you're not doing it with someone else, like you're missing out on that opportunity to really like have that other like lock and key.
Yeah. I mean, look, community and relationships is how we left the food chain and went from the middle to the top, right? Like it's, and telling stories is the baseline of long culture, right? And like how we proliferate religions and ideologies and art and expression and all of that comes through. We can tell stories with dance, or we can tell stories with words, or we can tell stories with written words, or we can tell a story with art, or now with video, and now, all the things of that nature. But like you said, the relationships, it's like we met on Lunch Club, and I met one guy on Lunch Club, years ago that I was looking to introduce to like somebody that represents animation studios, and he knew a guy, so he introduced me to that guy. But I built a great relationship with that guy, and we talk, and then that guy, he's retired and whatever, so like, but we still built a nice relationship. We talk all the time, and now he loves my story, right? Like, because we've talked and he knows who me. So now my stories resonated with him. So now he shares that with his friends, right? And those friends have been introducing me to other people, and that turned into business. So it isn't about like, hey, I need this person to buy a thing for me. It's like, hey, I want to connect with people that are in my sphere of like people that I just read that we resonate with each other. We have similar values or similar beliefs, Like you and I are very different in some ways, but we're very alike in other ways, right?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and now I know your story quite well and like who you are, and I will share that story with people as it comes up and it makes sense in the world. And that's really what it's about, just like doing navigating these relationships, meeting as many people as possible, and hearing their story and connecting with them and sharing your story, right? Like it doesn't need to be more complicated than that in terms of like growing your network. So.
No, and it's about like authentic relationships.
Yes.
That to me is, I feel like the biggest shift that's about to embark in what we're doing. And we've been hearing about authenticity, and like with the onset of now AI
influencers, whole accounts that are fake people.
Yeah. I mean, Gary Vaynerchuk talked about that, and like that there's literally going to be in 10 years from now, there's going to be literally AI bots that are basically influencing you to buy something because they're just AI bots. And it's like, wow.
Yeah. No, it don't make sense.
And there's this piece though of what do we really want? Like that can happen and that becomes very transactional, right? Because it's like, here's this thing, buy this thing. Here's this thing, buy this thing. Here's this thing, buy this thing. I heard this just not that long ago, and I can't remember if it was on Joe Polish or something, but they said, you know, the best things really, I mean, there's a Michael Franti song called The Best Things in Life Are Free, right? Yeah. Anything that's actually valuable is like truly valuable is actually free.
Yeah.
Our families, our friends, like, no, there's time, like you're putting effort in. You're putting in, you know, that time to have a coffee with them, to listen to them as they're having a challenging time. Like, look, if there's one thing about us all humans is that we're all challenged. We have struggle, right? Sometimes we're like on top, sometimes we're really down in the dumps.
Totally, man.
Right? And so like there's a humanity there. And so like sometimes you're going to be up there. Like 2 weeks ago, I met up with a friend. It was actually an ex-girlfriend of mine from like 15 years ago. We just left things very amicably. I met up with her. I'm a very optimistic, very positive person. And like, she's known me for over 15 years. And like, I met up and this just after, like, I gave her a hug when we met up at the bridge and then we were going out for coffee. I just kind of let out this sigh. She's like, what? I'm like, you know, I'm an optimistic guy, positive guy. And I'm like, I'm struggling.
Yeah.
And like, she just listened to me the entire time to this coffee shop. Not because it was like all like just living in complaint. At the same time, like you just I just needed to be heard.
Yeah. Right? It's got to get it out. Yeah.
A good friend was able to like reflect back some things and she was able to point back and to say, and it was just like nothing, quote unquote, had changed other than the fact, and everything had changed, right? Like the situations that happened before me talking to her were all still there. At the same time, like just being able to speak it out and having someone that could be there to listen was that, you know, and I have some just great conversations with like my girlfriend and we'll talk about different things and we have challenging conversations about really tough things. And it's beautiful because we have an opportunity to actually hear each other and listen to each other and like be there to just kind of do it. And that's like, that's the relationship. That's the be able to, you know, in relationships, they've always heard like 50-50. Well, it's actually sometimes 99-1. Right? Yeah. Sometimes it's 199.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's just like, how can you be there when that person really does need you? And even in this, even out there, like in the world, and whether we're talking about business relationships, but this could just be relationships with other humans. Like next time you're at a checkout, like ask the person how they're doing and care.
Yeah.
100%. Like, how are you doing? Like, no. Like, how are you doing? And here's the best thing. If you want to try this, like, I really invite you to do it. It's actually been really fun. When you ask that, like, how they doing, there's sometimes they'll be like, oh, it's tough or something. I'm like, well, what would make it better?
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And people are like, in a lot of ways, they don't even know what to say.
No kidding. No kidding.
I started doing that a little while ago, and it was like, it was fun. And some people were able to like, what would make it better?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, like it's reframing their mind in a way that like, because a question can reframe like where you're going.
100%. Yeah.
Right. And that's your relationship, like with the person who's actually checking your groceries. You couldn't eat if that person did check out. I mean, I guess, quote unquote, I guess you could steal the stuff, but you know, obviously, but like, you know, you couldn't actually eat if that person wasn't in the checkout to be able to actually like scan your credit card. Like, right. I don't know. I never thought about that in that way. Right. But like, they're important. Every person that you meet is important in some way, shape, or form.
Right. That's the principle there. They're like, we discount each other so much in this busy world, just buzzing around. And the thing that really makes people stand out is genuine human connection. You're tying that back into more of this authenticity. Like, we're going to get more and more fake bullshit, like on the internet, like selling us more shit we don't need to, drive up, Bezos's, 40% market share of retail. But like, I digress. But
tell me how you really feel.
But it's with the more human and the more real and the deeper connections and taking that time to have little meaningful interactions is huge, right? Because like you said, like you might see that checkout clerk, a couple times a month or a couple times a week, depending on how many times you go to that grocery store, and like, why not have a deeper, more meaningful relationship with them? Why not know them a little more? They know you a little more, and who knows? Like, who knows what happens there? Like, I've done that at my grocery store and like hooked up dudes that were like, "Oh, I'm actually a graphic designer." I was like, "Dude, I'd love to help you out. Like, just because I know where you're at. You just graduated school. We had some of the same teachers. Like, you went to my same like university. Like, let me hook you up. Like." But that, like, he was just putting cereal on the shelf, you know what I mean? Like, so but that's cool, right? Because that feels good, and you get to connect with people and help people.
Well, and here's the thing, and this is what I say in so many different ways, and that's why inside of my bio is like art with intention. Intentions matter, right? If your intention is you're going to hook up this guy to a graphic person so that you can eventually hold that over his head, so that he owes you something sometime later on.
Yeah.
That's not at all what your intention was. You're like, look, I know, you've been where he's at. And so your intention is pure. And it's like the pureness that comes from the pure intention versus the intention of trying to sell. I just listened to Gary Vaynerchuk's commencement speech last night. He posted on Instagram, and it was the NYU. And, where was I going with that?
Intentions, authenticity.
Intention matters. He's like, there are people at the top, billionaires. He's like, they got there because they are inadequate. They feel inadequate.
Right.
That's how they got to billionaire status. He's like, and there's others that you could get there through intimidation or inadequacy. I think it was inadequacy or confidence.
Yeah.
And he's like, if you get there through confidence, it's a whole different realm. He's like, the people that get there through inadequacy are there and they're miserable.
Yeah.
Right. So everything's transactional. You could fake all you want. He's like, don't. And you could cheat and you could do this and you could do this. And by no means was I inviting anyone to steal anything. And right. It's like, you could steal, like, right, to kind of get things of whatever you think you deserve. Right. At the same time, like, what we really are here for is to go through the adversity so that you can actually speak to that guy who's putting up boxes on the cereal, because you're like, yeah, you went through that adversity. You know that that's part of what he needs to go through. And if there's an opportunity to help kind of navigate through that in some way, shape, or form, then by all means, you're going to be able to help take some steps that he might not have needed to take, or take some steps that he could take that are actually going to be a little bit less, instead of going all these other ways, it's going to be a little bit more of a straighter path. But, the path is still the path, and it's all part of the journey that we all need to live into and step into. And, the adversity that we all go through gives us an opportunity to have perspective from other people.
100%, man. I think about it a lot. Like, I've got lots of mentors, and I also mentor lots of people, right? Like, so it's, I got one hand reaching forward for help and another one reaching back, bringing somebody with me, right? Like, it's like, right. So, but that's how we should all work, right? It's like, I promised every time somebody sat down, gave me their precious time, which is our most valuable resource. While it doesn't cost any money, it's all we have, right? Like, everything else is not, is not as important as our time. And, I just say, I don't know why you're doing this, but I promise that, like, I will pay it forward. Right. And that's been my thing for a long time. And, I'm obviously I didn't invent that, but like, every time I think, man, there's going to be a lot of energy to help this person. It's like, you know what? It's totally worth it. Right. Because people put a lot of energy in helping me.
Yeah, and I feel that, and that's why, like, there's times where you'll send me an email or something, and you're like, I appreciate you, and I'm like, that's why, like, I really connect and have connected, and that's why I'm like, hey, when we were talking the other day, like, hey, should I be on the podcast? I'm like, yeah, I'd love to, because like that's who you are,
Yeah.
right? You didn't say that so I can mention that on the podcast, and I'm not saying that to lift you up in any way other than just like who has this a genuineness for like who you are and who I see you to be, and who I know you're like what you're looking to do and what you're up to.
And likewise, Mark, like you're an amazing human being. So it's fun to be on here doing this podcast with you. So.
Thanks. Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. Agreed. Always fun.
Yeah, man. Well, look, we are coming towards the end of time here.
Whoa, really? The end of time?
the end of all creation, or this episode. One or two.
Okay, the episode. Okay.
That was awesome. All right, so our outro. What we have here is there anything in your career that you'd like to shout out to the audience? Maybe a mentor, valuable resource, favorite client, something you think that would be helpful for other people to look into?
It's funny because I was just talking, I know you kind of mentioned this a little bit earlier. And so I was just talking about Gary Vaynerchuk. And I watched one of his TED Talks in 2008. It said, do what you love, no excuses. And at the time, I was really struggling through the economic downturn. Well, 3 years later, after going to a Tony Robbins event, I basically came back, called my parents, said, I'm quitting my job and I'm pursuing my passion. 4 days later, Gary was actually in Tempe, Arizona at the time. That's where I was living before I relocated to Bend. And he was launching his book called Thank You Economy. And I went up to him and I said, hey, I watched your TED Talk 3 years ago. And I shook his hand. I got a video of me meeting Gary 4 days after I quit my job to pursue my passion. 13 years later, I'm still following him. And I just appreciate what he's been talking about, because he's successful because he's detached himself from successful. And he's also like in those words, like the way that he's even articulating the words, like I know, like even what he's not trying to boast himself by saying he's successful. Like That's not his thing. He's like, he's successful because it's detached himself from the money, from the followers and all of that. He's like, I don't care about that. He's like, it's a hobby of mine. He's like, it's like going golfing. And I really like, the more and more I see about him and like what he's talking about, I really resonate. And I look forward to meeting him again and actually having a deeper conversation.
Yeah.
And for those that may not know who Gary is, I mean, he connects to some, he doesn't others. I really appreciate what he's talking about, because there's been some parents that have come up to him and talk like, hey, how do I talk to my kids? And he's like, it's the thing that he's talking to his kids so much about is self-esteem. He's like, care and love yourself, not from the standpoint of just being, there's a difference between loving yourself, right? And being in love with yourself, that like you're, the end all be all, right? But It's like this, like there's a really, it's the same words, but it's very different. And so anyhow, I'd like to give a shout out to Gary and what he's talking about, what he's sharing, what he's inviting. Like he talked to this NYU class, this business class. He's like, you know what? Let me explain what the phrase I'm about to say, but he's like, you all need to be punched in the face. Not literally. Well, maybe some of you maybe do.
Yeah.
But he's like, you need to go through adversity.
Yeah.
And he's like, adversity makes us all grow. And so I appreciate a lot of the comments and things that he's been talking about lately. So I'd like to give a shout out to Gary.
Yeah, it builds a lot of character. I, like you've been following Gary Vee for a similar amount of time, and amazing human being. Definitely has the right message, the right motivational just way of speaking, and I resonate deeply with that. He kind of gave me permission to kind of be myself and say whatever the fuck I want, right? Like, because it's like that's the vibe, right? Like, because it is really authentic, right? And he's like, people try to like get me to come on their show and then tell me I can't cuss, and he's like, how's that even gonna work? He's like, I'm not. This is how I talk. Like it's like, So I just, once I saw this guy doing things, crushing it, being successful. I've read 2 of his books, and I love Gary Vee. He's huge. It's a huge influence on me for sure. So I've never met him at all. I have no actual connections whatsoever, but super cool. Maybe we'll get him on the podcast one day though. Cool.
There you go. Love it.
All right. So big shout out to Lunch Club, by the way. That's where you and I met. So if you guys aren't familiar with that, it's an amazing platform. Very, very amazing. Like just casual, like easy to the algorithm, you build a little profile. I call it like speed dating for business, more or less. And they just match you with somebody based on what you said you're looking to, do and who you're looking to meet. And you have, 30, 45-minute conversations. I've met amazing people on there. Algorithm there is really, really good. Mark and I both have access to it. It's invite only, but like, let us know. We'll definitely invite you. It's an amazing platform.
And one quick thing, if I could just add to, like, it's one of those things that you have no idea where the conversation is going to go. Like I talked about like quantum mechanics over here on like whatever, right? And so it's kind of like you just meet cool people and show up as you and like talk about the things you enjoy talking about. And like we weren't, again, both either of us weren't like, hey, like I'd like to work with you. And like, well, we actually kind of did say that, but it wasn't like, it's just an organic networking. I've been to networking events where you're like, here's my business card, here's your business card. Like, and it's very here, like Lunch Club is down here.
Yeah. The awkwardness is not there very often. I think I had one awkward conversation, but people are just showing up to chit chat, right? Like, so you have each other's undivided attention. Yeah. And it's probably a great way for some more introverted artists and people that aren't as experienced in just being a good conversationalist. Probably a great place to start. It's low risk. You're on a video chat. Like, they're not like in your bubble. I think it's probably an amazing. I mean, I met my attorney on Lunch Club. Like, that's nice. Like literally, I got her into Web3, and now she's like huge in the space, doing a lot of great stuff there. And like her and I talk all the time, so it's pretty cool. Anyway.
Awesome.
Cool. All right. Well, Mark, I really appreciate you. So again, we've been talking with Mark Jamnik, founder of Kindred Growth Advisors. You can check out their website at kindredgrowth.com. But if listeners want to follow up with you directly, where should they go?
I would say just go there, go to kindredgrowth.com. I actually do this live CRM call once a month. You can actually sign up for that. It's a free call. It's 30 minutes. Bring your CRM question. How do we talk about like developing your relationships, utilizing CRM tools and things of that nature? So I would say go on to kindredgrowth.com/live-CRM and sign up. And, it's cool. I'll send over a worksheet, a video on what we're going to cover in the worksheet. And then you bring your questions, and it's a Q&A, kind of like, Colin had some ideas of what we're going to talk about here today, but this is very meandering. Let's just say this. And that's exactly how the live CRM call is. So I'd love to see you there, meet you there. It's very kind of like, just organic side as well for me to meet you. So that would be the best place to go. kindredgrowth.com/live-CRM.
Awesome. And I haven't been on that yet. I'm going to, but I can attest that Mark really has some interesting and meaningful ways of navigating how to build that part of your business. It's really powerful stuff. So definitely check it out.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Carl.
Yeah. All right, Mark. Well, thank you for being on the show, my man. And until next time, friends, we'll see you soon. Peace. Thanks for stopping by. We really hope you enjoyed the show. Please like and subscribe to join us on our next journey through the world of art and business on the Pixel Retentive Podcast.